Welcome, everyone, to the first monthly training of 2026. Congratulations, you've made it to the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. Today's topic is going to be exploring what is new in NEMSIS 3.5.1. I want to thank Josh Legler and Clay Mann for making the time today to host and do this training for us. As I was saying, we're utilizing the question and answer section. So if you have a question or comment, please place it in there. If you want to be notified about presentations like this and other goings on for NEMSIS, please make the time to go to your favorite social media site and look for NEMSIS TAC, or sign up for our newsletter. If you go to the very bottom of the nemsis.org webpage and look for the button that says submit a help desk ticket, one of the options of submitting a help desk ticket is to be placed on our mailing list, and then you'll be notified about this and many goings on in the NEMSIS TAC. Other than that, I would like to go ahead and I believe I'm turning the time over to Josh. Josh, please take it over from here.
Actually, over to Clay.
Oh,
Yeah, that's fine. Hey, hello everyone. Happy New Year. Josh and I will be co-leading this presentation. I'm going to actually walk through the slides, and Josh's job is to correct me every time I say something that's not correct. It's an error. So we will work together to ensure that you receive the best information you can about the advances that we've made with a minor revision to the NEMSIS standard 3.5.1. So let's begin the presentation. We're going to cover a number of issues, a number of learning objectives associated with this topic in this presentation. We're going for those who may be less familiar with NEMSIS, maybe state data managers that have started their jobs recently, or if we have providers, to just talk a little bit about the versioning process, why we version, what it means to have a minor versus a critical patch versus an informational revision. We'll talk about those. What are the ramifications to agencies and states when a new version of NEMSIS is implemented? And then, of course, it'll be important for us to talk about, well, what do we gain by moving from the version 3.5.0, which is the current version that the nation is adhering to? Why move to version 3.1? What are the additions or the advancements that were made? And then maybe some short discussion about some of the tools that are available to help agencies or states to communicate the changes that have been made and how to prepare for new versioning. So lots to cover. Let's begin by talking about why we version the NEMSIS standard. So of course, the NEMSIS standard is now over 20 years old, and its infancy, it was truly developed to identify and provide uh, data associated with the care of a patient and the workings of the EMS system for a 911 dispatch and a ground transport. And really, in that 20 years, the NEMSIS industry has changed so much. The composition of what we do really is like out of facility healthcare. It's not even really kind of pre-hospital care or out of hospital care with CPMIH, pre-hospital blood transfusions is a growing interest and will be kind of incredibly important to agencies this year. Community surveillance, all these new and kind of burgeoning opportunities for the EMS industry requires that we remain facile with the NEMSIS standard, that we can make changes. There's a short term or kind of an immediate patch for that, right? The NEMSIS standard allows for custom elements to be developed within agencies or within states, to kind of deal with these burgeoning needs, kind of more real time. But really, for us to be able to tell our story across the nation to our states and to our national partners, consistent and constant standardization is essential. So really, NEMSIS is built so that we can provide short-term solutions, but those short-term solutions need to translate into a standardized approach for the entire nation. Custom elements are not collected at the national level, so every state can ensure that they're collecting what they need. But if there's something that's important to us, COVID, vaping, the illnesses associated with vaping, those growing topics, right? We can have short-term solutions, but we need to come together as a nation and standardize that so that we can look at these issues across our nation. So there are different ways that we version NEMSIS. There are basically four categories, and I apologize. There's lots of verbiage on this slide, but we'll go through each to make sure that you're clear about what constitutes a revision of a certain type. So I'll start with an informational release. NEMSIS could release a new version that really is an informational release where we include corrections to the data dictionary. We provide updated links. Maybe there's links that are now failing. An informational release will always be backwards compatible because we're not changing any of the actual structure or intent of the standard. We'll talk about what it means for something to not be backwards compatible in just a moment. But I'm trying to recall, I think only twice in the history of NEMSIS have we released an informational release. What we will most often do is when a minor release is due or a major release is needed, all of those corrections to the dictionary, those updated links all get built into that minor release or the major release. A minor release includes changes that will be always more permissive of the standard. So that's a good way to think about it. That examples would be, you can add an element to NEMSIS even under a minor release, but that element needs to be optional, right? So it's permissive, right? It doesn't require everyone to comply. So minor releases will always be permissive. And a release will be backwards compatible, meaning a previous version of NEMSIS could be submitted and will work into a new minor release of NEMSIS. That's what backwards compatible means. A previous version can be implemented and absorbed and utilized within a newer version. A major release are really changes that make the standard more restrictive. So say we upgrade an element from a state or optional element to a national element. Now the standard is more restrictive. That would require a major release, and major releases are not backwards compatible. You can't take a previous version and have it just autofill and work into the newer version. Okay, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Critical patches. Just this last year, we went through several critical patches to deal with some executive orders from the White House. They're really used to correct security or functionality, and in this case, a political requirement. So critical patches usually aren't scheduled, and they're released as needed. Well, let's talk about the major and minor releases in a little more detail, maybe give you a couple of additional examples. I know in my head, if I think about a minor release versus a major release, often I'll think, well, a major release is adding an element, and a minor release is just making a change to a value or something. Well, the classification of what's major or minor is really related to that restrictive or permissive idea. So here's just a couple of additional examples. So for a major release, as I mentioned, any document in an older version may not be valid in a newer version. Any document created in a newer version may not be valid in an older version. So that's backwards compatible and forwards kind of compatibility. There needs to be translation to make those be able to speak. And often the translations may be good or may not be good, right? If you've added a new element, right, then there's just no good translation for that. Changes for a major version would be XML structure changes, new required or mandatory elements, the deprecation of a mandatory element, all those kind of things would be a major version release. A minor version release, oh, and what I'll also mention with this idea of compatibility, really for a major release, it really requires the states to move to the new major version before the local agencies move to the new version, simply because documents created in an older version will not be valid in the newer version, right? That is the definition of a major release. So states need to move first. Let's talk a little bit more about a minor revision of
And Clay, I'll
yeah,
just
Josh.
chip in for a sec
Yeah,
too.
please.
With a major release, typically a state is going to have to run both versions at once so that the locals can get switched over and have a transition period, right? So states ran 3.4.0 and they ran 3.5.0 in parallel for several years while their agencies got switched from one to the other. So that's how you have to handle major releases, because you've got to allow that transition to happen.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. And maybe one more clarification here that people may be thinking about. We list here as a major version change under the last bullet here is a deprecation of a mandatory element. Well, we did have to deprecate an element this past year, gender, within the e-patient section. Well, we didn't go through a major revision. Well, that was a critical patch, which could include and often only includes major versioning type issues. Right, Josh?
Right. And the thing with a critical patch is that it only includes one thing or two things, just what has to be changed, uh, just for that one issue to keep the standard running.
Thank you, Josh. So let's go through a minor version release. It is backwards compatible without a translation. So any document created in an older version would be valid in the newer version, but any document created in the new version may not be valid in the older version. So again, it's only backwards compatible. That is, an older version is valid if it's submitted to a newer version. So again, as Josh was describing, it's really required that states are moving before agencies, but as he mentioned, they can be running two versions of the NEMSIS standard at one time, waiting for all of the agencies to catch up and be compliant with the newer version. What are some of the other kind of changes that can happen under a minor version release? We can add new values to an existing element. We'll go through examples of that with 3.5.1. We can deprecate values in an existing element. We can add new attributes to an existing element. We can add recommended or optional elements, and so elements can be added under a minor release. And we'll see examples of that in 3.5.1. One of the take-home messages here that I just want to make sure we're clear, we've stated it several times, that really, for example, what does this mean for the implementation of version 3.5.1? EMS agencies submitting 3.5.0 records will be accepted into the 3.5.1 compatible repository. But however, if an agency moves to 3.5.1, but the state repository remains or is kept at the 3.5.0 compliance, these records will fail. So it's important to recognize what it means to be backwards compatible. So this is an important point, and we may have questions related to this as we move forward. So with this idea in mind, the NEMSIS standard, we try to as new comments or ideas come in from stakeholders as to changes that need to be made to the standard, we try to organize those into those that would produce a major release, those that would only require a minor release. We try to minimize major releases because they are more time consuming for agencies, for states to understand, and for software vendors to implement. we try to provide minor releases to take care of the bulk of the issues that are being requested as changes and are approved by stakeholders. Minor revisions serve that purpose. There can be just one minor reversion between major reversions, or there could be multiple minor versions between the major versions. All right, well, that's a walkthrough about versioning and why it's important that we version with minor versus major releases, and how we try to structure those to minimize the disruption in our industry, though trying to remain current with the issues and the environment changes within the EMS industry. Well, let's talk about what are some of the highlights and even maybe some of the more detailed parts of the NEMSIS version 3.5.1. What makes moving to this standard valuable? So we'll go through some high level things that we at the NEMSIS TAC hear a lot about, or had lots of stakeholder input into making those revisions. And let's talk about those. So as folks know, the bulk of the direction national that we receive from federal partners in regards to the EMS agency comes from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, where the Office of EMS is found. They were very interested in us adding a way to document that an EMS provider may have been struck by a vehicle on a roadway while caring for a patient that is a victim of a pedestrian versus motor vehicle crash, or an overall motor vehicle crash, but just providing some way to capture that data. Right now, there really is no way to be able to capture that data. So that's been added to the standard. The capability for agencies and states to document violent acts that are perpetrated against their EMS providers. We've also relaxed a number of the data entry requirements that are defined and adhered through schematron warnings. We've reduced and relaxed some of those warnings. We'll talk about that. And then we'll go through some of the other details, right? Some of the other things that I think that are incredibly important and valuable that are included in 3.5.1. So let's begin by talking about the documentation of a provider struck by a vehicle or experienced violence. So those changes have been made to E-Other 06 in version 3.5.1. You can see the codes that have been added for violence, and violence has been defined in several different ways using some folks who helped us to ensure that we were legally using terms that could be representative of the type of offensive or hateful language that may be expressed against our providers, an actual physical threat or a physical attack, unwelcome attention, unwanted touching. All those are listed as elements within E-Other 06. Also, you can see that we've added the ability to document that a professional EMS professional has been struck by a vehicle along the roadway. One of the other nice visualizations that are present on the NEMSIS website is the ability to look at how many states collect these elements that are not nationally required. So nationally required elements here at the bottom of your screen are listed on this data dictionary on the website in red, right? So there are 39 states that mandate that E-Other 05 be used. That's a national element. So we consider that required. So you can see that E-Other 06, looking at the type of a work-related death or exposure to violence in this case, lots of states consider that an important element. 36 of the 39 states that provide us with data dictionaries collect that now as a state element, even though it's not collected nationally. So this change will apply to a lot of states that have found this type of an element to be valuable. Well, let's switch now and talk about the reduction in national schematron warnings. probably the one warning that has caused us the most concern. And what I mean by concern is when we build a validation rule, there will always, almost always be an exception to that rule in our industry. So rather it being an error, we call it a warning because it may be that a provider has a very unique situation, documents it correctly, a warning comes up, but there was no error that was made, right? There was no correction that needed to be made. So these are warnings. The one warning quote that fires the most is this idea of requesting our providers to document a primary method of payment when they are transporting a patient with their unit. So that's the structure when the rule fires. Well, of course, there are providers across this, there are agencies and systems across our country who do not bill or in other ways collect information regarding payment. And so this, as you can see from a national look of warnings that are fired across the country, the records that we receive, I just pulled this from the last 12 days of records that we've received here at NEMSIS, and you can see that yeah, this idea of sex being recorded with the new critical patches is our new number one warning that's firing. But before that, our number one warning was always the primary payment of our primary method of payment. You can see almost 500,000 within 12 days here at the national level. So removing this schematron rule, this validation rule is I think a good idea. You can also see that we've relaxed the requirement that anatomic location and organ system associated with the complaint to be documented. So what we're trying to do here is ensure that when our providers are completing a record, that if they do see a warning, that they will place some credence in that wording rather than just always seeing these warnings coming across every record that they complete and then thinking that they should probably just ignore them because they're not applying to the actual situation that they're in. So we're trying to sculpt these rules to be clearer, cleaner, more consistent, and only fire when necessary. This is a step in that direction. All right, so that highlights some of the larger things that I wanted to make sure that we touched upon. But I'd like to show all the viewers that are here with us, where can you go to look at all of the improvements that are present associated with 3.5.1. I'm going to take you there on the NEMSIS website, show you where those are found. So if I go to the NEMSIS website, nemsis.org, and it would be great if you could go there with me. I think I'm going to be showing you something that I think you'll find very valuable. So knowing where it is will be helpful for you as you're contemplating what's changing with version 3.5.1. So in the NEMSIS website, if we go to using NEMSIS data, you'll see here the version 3.5 revision section. If you click on that, and then you hit the list of v3.5 resources, you'll find a lot of resources for you associated with the newest version 3.5.1, and some of the older documentation that we provided associated with 3.5.0. If you click on this summary spreadsheet right here, 3.5.1 elements comparison, this will be an Excel spreadsheet that will compare what are the changes from 3.5.0 to 3.5.1. And I have that. So go ahead and click on that. I have that open. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and I've just blown it up a little bit so that hopefully you can see some of this on your screen. But you'll be able to access that and be able to look in more detail if you want to. But let me walk you through how you look at this Excel spreadsheet and how it can be valuable to you. So all the changes that are associated with 3.5.0 to 3.5.1 have been highlighted with a color. Elements or values that are deprecated, that is, they've been removed from the standard, appear in purple. New values appear in green, and then changes to the description or corrections in grammar, right, or misspellings, those will all be blue. So let's walk through some of those, and we'll highlight some. So as you move down through here, let's start with row 22. You'll see that we've added a value to type of response delay that's NEMSIS went out, that's present in NEMSIS. You can see all of the existing values, why there was a delay in response time. Stakeholders approved that we're adding here that a response could have been delayed because you were out of your service area at the time of the response. That was added with version 3.1, so that can be utilized within the standard. Let's walk down through here. Reasons for dispatch. Lots of reasons why patients could be dispatched. We've added additional values based on stakeholder input to include active shooter, intoxicated subject. You can read those here. So additional values have been added to the dispatch reason. I'm just highlighting some of the broader categories here. Race, we've added some pertinent negatives to the collection of a patient's race. And of course, we added the value of Middle Eastern or North African that was prescribed by the federal government to be an addition to race. We've added an ability to indicate that you're documenting a patient's age, but it's approximate, so a new pertinent negative to help you correctly identify the data. We've added an element that's patient's preferred language. And so it was not found in 3.5.0, and now the new values are listed here in 3.5.1 that you can see. We, of course, have added the new element of sex, and so that's now present. You'll notice also for lots of the values that are associated with primary symptoms or primary or secondary impression of the patient, those in the past, we did not allow U codes within the ICD-10 structure. U codes are used for new diagnoses, growing new types of illness, new illness symptoms, for example. So COVID codes were first there. They were U007, was identifying a patient with COVID. I think the vaping codes are still there, and maybe some micromobility codes may still be listed in U codes. With 3.5.0 or earlier versions, U codes were not able to be kind of added to the standard because of the limitation on the ICD-10 code set. So it's been expanded to allow U codes to be used. So an incredibly important addition. A new element or a new values for e-patient 25 have been added so that you can indicate whether or not you have transferred a patient or received a patient from an agency, another important change. Time of cardiac arrest, we've added some pertinent negatives there that needed to be there. Medical history, added U codes. Here you can see some corrections, some misspellings that were corrected here in blue. We've added the ability to indicate that a bystander reports that your patient has used drugs or alcohol, and that is associated with this call. I'll move down through here. We've added additional stroke scales and added the ability on the scores with pertinent negatives to indicate why you couldn't get the score. We worked down through a couple of these others. We've deprecated some lab results that would never be found in the pre-hospital setting. Those are there. Some corrections on spelling. We have removed the back and spine assessments, flank left, flank right, because those are found in the abdominal um, uh, section.
Those were marked as additions.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, thank you. Those are additions. I was talking about our referring to changes to the abdominal area, which we'll get to right away. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. We've added some extremity assessments that were requested, additional corrections. We've also added some new elements that are of value. One is the ability to indicate that a medication or a procedure was administered by another unit rather than your unit when you're completing your record. Another new element that's been added in the procedure section is the ability to document an airway placement technique. So those are now, that element is now found in the procedure section. And in addition, these new elements to the medication and procedure section indicating who gave the medication or performed the procedure. Work down through some others here. Another important change was to the ability to document the position of the patient during transport. Version 3.5.0 and earlier versions only had one option for pediatric patients. Version 3.5.1 adds a number of additional pediatric methods for the transport and stabilization of a patient during transport. And then we've mentioned the work-related additions for violence that are present in EOTHER 06. So that's kind of a rough overview of what we've added, why we've made some of the changes. We've talked about that. You can go through here in detail and have a really good understanding of what is included in the change, right? So let's go back to our presentation. All right. Let's move now to the last item that I was going to cover, and that was what tools are available for you as an agency or a state to prepare to move to a new version. Found in that same location on the website where you're all at, if you go to the bottom of that section, so past the 3.5.1 resources, the 3.5.0 resources, several of our state data managers have posted very helpful products that they were willing to share that kind of would help with you positioning your state or positioning your agency for a new version of the NEMSIS standard. I'll just highlight a couple of them here. Mann in Arizona has put together a very nice kind of agency level checklist for what the agency may want to consider with any version change to the NEMSIS standard. So very detailed and provides a lot of information for agencies. Another great one that was provided for an agency transition checklist, Cassie Longhart, who was the former state medical or data manager for Georgia, also provided a great process for agencies to be able to prepare for a new version. So those are incredibly valuable. If you move down here, Beth has done a great job of looking at what's the impact of the changes to an agency to a state with the changes. So she did a great job of indicating like what's an important change, what's a not so important change. Another great way I think that a state has prepared, you know, the state level folks that are the state level stakeholders, and then also agencies within their state that were making the change. So you'll find a lot of great resources in this same area within the website. Then finally, I'll just mention we've put together just a brief summary of the topics that we've discussed today. We'll send out this as just a high-level one-page sheet of the enhancements that we've mentioned today that we think are kind of most important to mention. Feel free to distribute this. Chris will be sending that out today, and so you can look for that. Um, I'll stop there and see if there are any questions that we can answer in regards to the material covered. Any questions at all?
Oh,
All
it's
right.
pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions about kind of like, well, what if my local EPCR vendor upgrades me to 351, but my state hasn't done it yet, or vice versa, things like that. Any questions out there about kind of timing of moving?
All right.
Okay.
Well, yes, it is a quiet crowd, so we either did a really good job or folks are still recovering from the new year.
Yeah.
Great.
I will say I do see several vendors represented on the call. If you work for a vendor that operates at the local agency level, so a collect data system, and you're wanting to move your customers to 351, but you're operating in a state that hasn't moved to 351, you could check out the translation resources that are published by the NEMSIS TAC. There's some translation XSLTs that'll convert your data from 351 to 350 just by taking out the new 351 features. Vendors at the local level, you could look at that as being part of your options for how you might roll this out locally. But we really want to encourage states to get up to 351 um, because there's really no additional burden in doing so. You're just turning on the latest release in the 350 series. Over time, you can decide if you want to, require your agencies to collect some of the new 351 stuff, but you don't have to do that right away. So it's very easy for states to just go ahead and turn on 351 and kind of move to that as their benchmark standard. And then over time, allow those new features to start to be used.
Yeah, and I'll mention just one other thing regarding the states that are on the call. If you've developed some resources that are associated with the movement of of your state and agencies from 3.5.0 to 3.5.1, we'd love to have copies of those and post them on the website so that they could be available for all. Um, and then also, if either the vendors or the state representatives, even agency representatives, if you think if there uh, um are there any other kind of resource tools? Clearly look at the tools that are available on the NEMSIS website, but if there's other resource tools that the NEMSIS TAC could be providing to you that would be helpful in educating folks to the differences between the two standards, we would be happy to develop those based on your recommendations. All right. Well, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you very much for everyone participating on the call today and listening in, and we hope the information was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to point out that one of the pieces of feedback here is that Ridgely said that between the two things is that she feels like you did a very good job. Oh, actually, we have a hand up here, so
Oh,
let's see if Rita has a question. And Rita, you should be able to unmute.
Thanks, Chris. I was clapping, but I do kind of have a question. I'm kind of
yes.
shy to ask, but I'm gonna ask. So, I'm our state, New Jersey, we have 351. We accept 351 and also 350, but like on our state system, I'm gonna run some reports with these new elements and see if we're getting data with the under those new elements that are 351 elements. And I kind of am thinking like I'm another way for me to tell, if they're sending us 351 or not, or if it's 350. Like I ran a couple reports like yesterday, and to me it looks like we're not getting any 351 yet from software vendors. But I'm going to run a report with those new elements, see if there's any data coming through under those new elements that to me would mean that they are sending us 351. But I guess it depends on like the software that we use at the state level in order for me to be able to determine like if they're sending us 350 or 351. But really that's my question is like, is there a quicker way to identify like what they're sending us? Is it 350 or is it 351 other than just running reports on the new elements, if that makes sense?
That's a great question, Rita. Rita, are you using at the state level, are you using image trend?
Yes.
Okay,
And we accept software, all different software vendors that are NEMSIS compliant.
great, Rita, helpful. Josh, is there a way to identify the tag on the file?
Yeah. Rita, in the web services submission that the local systems make to your state system,
Mhm.
they indicate what like one of the data elements in that web service submission is what version they're submitting in. And so I think that in your in your image trend system, you're going to have settings in your web services accounts where
Mhm.
you can allow people to submit 351, and you'd want to make sure that you've allowed them to submit under that version. And then you should be able to see in your import history in your state system whether something was submitted as 351 or as a 350 or an earlier version.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to take a look at import history and the web service. I know that I turned on 351 imports and
Mhm.
exports, so I know I'm good with that. I'm going to take a look at import history, and then and I know, Image Trend they have their own element to identify software version. So I'm just going to take a look at all of that stuff, but this is helpful. This entire webinar was very helpful, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Rita.
Looks like you have a couple of questions in the chat. One is from Ridgely that says, can you provide some sample U codes that would be high priority for services?
Oh, great question. Maybe we can prepare a list there. Really insightful question because U codes can be incredibly valuable for, as we mentioned, for just things that we're seeing now. I think, yeah, let's work on a list. I'll make,
I can bring up at least what's in there.
yeah,
Um, so this is future proofing the standard so that in 2027, when the next big public health outbreak happens and a new U code gets created, we'll be able to use it. But in the past, it has been used for COVID-19. You saw, several U codes that got created to temporarily handle COVID-19 until the ICD-10 standard was able to create a permanent code for it in the B chapter. And yep, there's a couple other COVID-19 ones, and I think we should be able to find yeah, there's the vaping one, U07.0, right? So this is a very short list of codes currently. And it's just codes that end up, they get put here first before they can kind of make their way into the standard in a more formal way.
yeah. It looks like all the micromobility codes have made their way in. We added two codes for those in the define list for injury. But yeah, allowing us to be able to capture U codes for real-time changes to the to this section will be incredibly valuable.
Awesome. And then the second question is from Kevin saying, great job, everyone. Will the PowerPoint be available? And so, yes, Kevin, I believe so. Like if you'd like the actual PowerPoint, we can make that available. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel and our website by the end of the week. So that's another way for you to access this material. Perfect. Big thumbs up from Kevin. Awesome. So, okay, I think that's it for this. Thank you so much for the questions and the participation. If I could get a big virtual round of applause for our hosts today. This is great information. Like I said, it will be available on our YouTube site by the end of the week. If you also would like to, just to remind you, any major social media website, look up NEMSIS TAC. You'll be notified about this and many other events and goings on, resources and whatnot from the NEMSIS TAC. And so, yeah, that is it. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you. Successful first presentation. Hope that we will see you for the rest of them for the rest of this year. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.